Daniel Hayes checked his watch for the third time that evening. 6:42 p.m. If everything went according to schedule, he would finish serving dinner by 10, clock out, pick up his 6-year-old daughter from his sister's apartment, and still have enough time to read her favorite bedtime story before she fell asleep. That simple routine mattered more to him than anything else. My name is Daniel Hayes. I was 36 years old, a single father, an air conditioning technician during the week, a banquet waiter on weekends. Life hadn't turned out the way I once imagined. For years earlier, my wife, Emma, had passed away after a sudden brain aneurysm. One ordinary Tuesday morning, we were laughing over breakfast. By Wednesday evening, she was gone. Nothing prepares you for silence after losing the person who filled your home with laughter. For months, I barely functioned. If it hadn't been for my daughter, Lily, I honestly don't know how I would have survived. She was only 2 years old when we lost her mother. Somehow, even as a toddler, she understood enough to wrap her tiny arms around my neck whenever she saw me crying. One evening she whispered something that changed everything. "It's okay, Daddy. I'll help you smile." Children have a remarkable way of saving adults without realizing they're doing it. From that day forward, every decision I made centered on one promise. Lily would grow up knowing she was loved, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. Money became tight after Emma died. Medical bills had drained nearly all our savings. I sold our second car, moved into a smaller apartment, worked every overtime shift my regular job offered. On weekends, I accepted catering jobs through a local agency. The work was exhausting, but every extra dollar went into a college savings account with Lily's name on it. No matter how difficult life became, I refused to let her future be limited by my circumstances. That Saturday evening, my sister Grace watched Lily while I worked a private event at the Grand Imperial Hotel. Grace hugged me before I left. "You work too much." Daniel smiled. "I work enough." She shook her head. "Lily would rather have more time with you than a bigger college fund." I kissed Lily's forehead. "I'll be home before you wake up." She grinned. "Bring me one of those tiny chocolate cakes." I laughed. "I'll see what I can do." The Grand Imperial Hotel looked more like a palace than a hotel. Crystal chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings. Fresh flowers decorated every hallway. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Tonight's event wasn't an ordinary birthday party. It was the birthday celebration of Amelia Brooks, 34 years old, founder and CEO of Brooks Global Technologies. Business magazines described her as brilliant. Television interviews called her the youngest self-made billionaire in the country. Employees respected her. Competitors feared her. Investors admired her relentless discipline. Daniel knew almost nothing about her beyond newspaper headlines. To him, she was simply another client whose event helped pay next month's bills. Inside the ballroom, every table sparkled beneath soft golden lights. An orchestra quietly rehearsed near the stage. Servers hurried between kitchens and dining areas, making final preparations. The catering manager gathered everyone together. "Listen carefully. Tonight's guest list includes politicians, celebrities, and major investors. No mistakes. No arguments. If a guest complains, apologize immediately." Everyone nodded. Then the manager added something unusual. "And one more thing. Mr. Victor Langston is attending." Several experienced servers exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel quietly asked the waiter beside him, "Who's Victor Langston?" The older waiter sighed. "One of the wealthiest investors in the country. And probably the rudest customer you'll ever meet. He enjoys embarrassing staff." Daniel simply nodded. He had dealt with difficult customers before. They didn't frighten him anymore. As guests began arriving, cameras flashed continuously near the entrance. Amelia Brooks entered wearing a simple navy blue evening gown. Unlike many wealthy people Daniel had served over the years, she wasn't surrounded by bodyguards demanding attention. She smiled politely at employees, thanked the musicians, even complimented one of the floral arrangements. Daniel noticed something else. Despite smiling for photographers, her eyes looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying responsibilities too heavy for one person. Across the ballroom stood Victor Langston and his son, Preston. Victor watched Amelia with the confident smile of someone who believed every situation would eventually go his way. Preston adjusted his expensive cufflinks. "You'll announce it tonight?" Victor nodded. "She'll have no choice." Daniel happened to pass nearby carrying champagne. He heard only part of the conversation. The media is already here. Perfect. Public pressure works. Daniel continued walking. Whatever they were discussing had nothing to do with him. Or so he thought. As dinner began, everything appeared to run smoothly. Guests laughed. Music played softly. Servers moved efficiently between tables. Then Daniel noticed Amelia standing alone near one of the balcony doors. She wasn't eating. She wasn't talking. She simply stared out at the city lights for a few quiet seconds. Before she could return to the ballroom, Victor intercepted her. Daniel couldn't hear every word. Only fragments. Good for both families. Shareholders already expect it. Stop refusing. Amelia answered firmly. I'm not marrying your son. Victor's smile never disappeared. You don't have to decide privately. You only have to smile publicly. Daniel walked away before hearing more. He had learned long ago that overhearing wealthy people's problems usually created unnecessary trouble. A few minutes later, photographers suddenly gathered near the ballroom entrance. Someone announced that several national business reporters had arrived unexpectedly. Victor smiled. Preston straightened his jacket. Amelia looked around the room with unmistakable panic. Her eyes searched the crowd desperately. Then they stopped on Daniel. He was quietly placing fresh glasses onto a nearby table. Nothing remarkable. Nothing attention-grabbing. Just an ordinary single father doing his job. Without warning, Amelia walked directly toward him. Before Daniel could even greet her, she gently grabbed his arm. Her hand trembled slightly. She leaned close enough that only he could hear. Please. I need your help. Daniel blinked in confusion. Ma'am. She took a slow breath before whispering the sentence that would completely change both of their lives. Act like my fiancé tonight. For a moment, Daniel was certain he had misunderstood. He stared at Amelia, waiting for her to smile and admit it was a joke. She didn't. Her fingers still rested lightly on his arm. There was genuine fear in her eyes. Not the fear of losing money. Not the fear of public embarrassment. The fear of someone who felt trapped. I'm serious, she whispered. Please. Daniel glanced around the ballroom. Reporters were already moving toward them. Camera flashes lit the room every few seconds. Victor Langston and his son Preston were walking in their direction with confident smiles. Daniel lowered his voice. I don't even know your last name. She gave a nervous laugh. It's Brooks. I know who you are. I mean, I don't know you. I know. And I'm asking a stranger for help. That sounds crazy. A little. She nodded. But you're the only person here who isn't trying to gain something from me. Daniel looked into her eyes. He had spent years reading people. Customers. Co-workers. Clients. Parents. He could usually tell when someone was lying. Amelia wasn't lying. She was desperate. He quietly asked one final question. If I help you, does anyone get hurt? She shook her head immediately. No. I just need tonight. Daniel slowly nodded. Okay. Relief flooded across her face. Thank you. Before he could say another word, photographers reached them. Amelia gently slipped her hand into his. She smiled naturally. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced. I'd like you to meet someone very important. Every camera turned toward Daniel. He suddenly wished he were back fixing air conditioners. Instead, dozens of reporters shouted questions. What's your name? How long have you been together? When's the wedding? Daniel managed a polite smile. My name is Daniel. We're keeping the rest private. The answer was simple, respectful, and it revealed nothing. Amelia glanced at him with quiet appreciation. Victor's expression darkened. He approached immediately. Amelia, you've never mentioned him. I wanted to protect our privacy. Victor extended his hand toward Daniel. His grip was firm, almost challenging. So, what exactly do you do? Daniel answered honestly. I repair heating and air conditioning systems. A few nearby guests exchanged surprised looks. Someone whispered, a repairman? Victor smiled politely. Interesting. Amelia answered before anyone else could. He's also the hardest working man I've ever met. The room became quiet. Nobody expected the billionaire CEO to sound genuinely proud. Dinner continued. Daniel remained beside Amelia whenever reporters were nearby. Whenever cameras disappeared, she quietly apologized. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this. He smiled. I've had stranger Saturdays. She laughed. For the first time that evening, her laughter sounded real. During dessert, Victor requested a private conversation. Daniel politely stepped away. Several minutes later, Amelia returned looking exhausted. He threatened you? Daniel asked softly. She nodded. He threatened the company. He said investors won't support someone who refuses to cooperate. Daniel looked across the ballroom. You've built a billion-dollar company. Why let one man scare you? She smiled sadly. Because he doesn't own one company. He owns influence. Board members. Investors. Newspapers. I've spent years fighting people who believe successful women should eventually hand everything to the right husband. Daniel shook his head. Sounds exhausting. It is. She looked at him carefully. You know, you haven't asked me for anything. He looked confused. What would I ask for? Money. A better job. Connections. He smiled. I already have everything I need. She raised an eyebrow. Really? My daughter. That's enough. Those simple words stayed with Amelia for the rest of the evening. When the party finally ended, Daniel quietly removed his borrowed jacket. I should go. Amelia walked him outside. The parking lot was almost empty. Daniel unlocked an old pickup truck with faded paint. She looked surprised. This is yours. It gets me where I need to go. He reached into the back seat, then smiled. I almost forgot. He held up a tiny chocolate cake wrapped in a napkin. My daughter requested one. Amelia couldn't help laughing. That's adorable. She negotiates hard. Before leaving, Daniel looked at her. Can I ask one question? Of course. Why me? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched several luxury cars drive away. Finally, she spoke. When I entered the ballroom tonight, every man looked at my company, my title, my money. She looked directly into Daniel's eyes. You looked at me for exactly 2 seconds. Then you asked another waiter whether the flower arrangement needed more water. Daniel smiled awkwardly. The lilies looked thirsty. She laughed again. Exactly. You saw a problem that needed solving. Not a billionaire. For the first time in years, Amelia realized how rare genuine kindness had become in her life. Daniel climbed into his truck. Good luck. You'll be fine. You sound very certain. I am. Why? Because people who refuse to surrender their values usually find a way through difficult seasons. She watched his truck disappear into the night. The next morning, every newspaper carried the same headline. Mystery man captures CEO's heart at birthday gala. Social media exploded with speculation. Board members demanded answers. Victor quietly began investigating Daniel Hayes. He expected to uncover hidden motives, financial problems, a criminal record, perhaps someone pretending to be ordinary. Instead, investigators returned with something entirely different. A widowed father, an impeccable reputation, neighbors who described him as the first person to help anyone in need. A little girl who proudly told her teacher every Monday that her daddy could fix almost anything. Victor closed the report slowly. For the first time in years, he had found a man who couldn't be bought. And deep inside, Amelia smiled when she realized something unexpected. The fake fiancé she had chosen to escape one difficult evening had unknowingly become the first person in years who made her believe genuine love might still exist. Not because of power, wealth, or status, but because one ordinary single father had treated the richest woman in the room like she was simply another human being in need of help.